Hello, everyone. Welcome to another installment of Caramoor Conversations. My name is Kathy Schuman. I'm the Artistic Director of Caramoor, and I'm here with David Fung, pianist, who will be performing at Caramoor on July 16th with the Verona Quartet in a piece that we have never presented at Caramoor, which I will guess most people are unfamiliar with. Piano Quintet by, I'll do my best with the name, sorry, Grażyna? Is that right? Grażyna
Right.
Bacewicz, a Polish composer from the last century, who I was not familiar with until about a year ago. Had never heard of her, but I've now listened to a lot of her music and really love it. So I'm thrilled that the quartet suggested playing this piece. So, David, I know you're a big champion of her work, so I'd love to know how you first encountered it.
Um, my first encounter with her music was only a few years ago. I want to say maybe 6 or 7 years ago, and it was a recording of one of my favorite pianists, a Polish pianist, Christian Zimmermann, who actually released two of the piano quintets together with her second sonata, which is the more popular of the two sonatas that she wrote for piano. And I was just thinking, oh, as I was hearing this, I was trying to guess who the composer was. And I was guessing all the famous composers, thinking, oh, this has got to be some unknown work. And as finally the radio presenter said, this is Grażyna Bacewicz, but I was thinking, okay, this is great. How do I spell it? And how can I look it up? And then I found the album. And essentially, I just kept digging deeper into some of the works. And one of the students at the University of Georgia where I teach also chose this composer as a special focus topic in sort of the underperformed composers category modules that we've been working on as well. So that was really nice to sort of revisit a lot of those works again, especially the ones beyond the piano repertoire. But she's incredibly prolific, and I think one of the things to really add is she's really at home with writing, not only for piano, which she took piano lessons, but in the Soviet tradition, of course, she learned two instruments, and her main instrument was violin. So, just really, really incredibly beautiful chamber music.
And how often have you played this piano quintet, and what makes this piece special?
Interestingly, this is my first time playing this quintet, so this is very exciting for me, and I've been discovering all the beautiful elements in it. I'm playing the second quintet later on, I think at the Tucson Chamber Music Festival later on in the season. So I'm doing both the quintets in the one season, which to me is very special. Again, sort of just because presenters, I think, are really wanting to present this incredibly beautiful music. And it's interesting. It's not the Dvorak, it's not the Schumann, it's not the Brahms, which are great works, but are kind of, tried and true works. Exactly. What makes, I think, this particular quintet really special is that it has all the hallmarks of her incredible compositional clarity and skill. She's really a works person when it comes to sort of the compositional craft. She studied with Nadia Boulanger in Paris, and one of those hallmarks is sort of this really ingenious kind of use of very sparse materials, is the way that I would kind of talk about it. And so, for this piece, she finds folk melodies, and then she finds intervals, or maybe increasing sets of intervals, and not just in a way that's very sort of devoid of the emotional content. It's always connected to character, to mood, to all of the beautiful textures and colors she's using. So, that's something that I think that she's able to achieve with a lot of these sort of formal techniques, which, when we think of sort of formal composers, we think Brahms, in terms of his chamber music, there's just a lot of uses again very sparse sets of materials, but he's able to wield incredible power from them. This is from this sort of Beethovenian idea as well, and she does it incredibly expertly, and is able to create different moods through the same kinds of materials. So that's something that I think makes the first quintet really, really special. Um, a couple of wonderful dance and folk-like materials that she's using, which is quite typical of the period for this work, but also really unexpected timbral, coloristic uses between the strings and the piano.
I read somewhere a description, somebody describing her work as neoclassical. Do you agree with that?
You know, it's interesting. I feel like I have to be careful before I say yes, it is neoclassical because I don't think she herself really liked that description. It's interesting because I think I think people did think of her as being somewhat neoclassical because of all the formalist kind of, the formalism in terms of how she crafted everything. This quintet is in four movements, and it distinctly has a scherzo movement. It distinctly has a slow movement. It has structures which are identifiably ABA and sort of tertiary forms as well. And the way in which she writes, it's very clear. There's always a sort of very clear sense of counterpoint. She uses polyphony incredibly well. There's a lot of clear delineations between backwards and forwards of parts. So you'll hear things like Hocket in the last movement, sort of really rapid interjections between the string quartet as a unit and the piano as well. And I think these things really lend themselves to this idea of the neoclassical. But when I think of other composers such as Ravel, which are referred to in the same way, yes, I mean there is a sort of crystalline delineation of a lot of these elements. But at the end of the day, all of these composers bring this incredible soul, and it's their soul that you really hear in this music. So in this particular quintet, you get an incredibly ethereal opening. It's almost timeless, and the strings sort of spin out this melody that happens really slowly. It's a very slow introduction, and then that material comes back in a much more kind of rhythmic and pulsating, scintillating way, and it's undeniably her. And I think that's what makes it really, really special, is that despite some of these more formal uses, she's able to find incredible depth in a lot of this music.
So, of course, the million-dollar question. She was very prolific. I think she wrote more than 200 works. She actually was quite famous in her lifetime. And why don't we hear more of her works? And I don't really expect you to come to it, but let's talk about why that is that we're just discussing right now.
That's really the question of the hour. I think as classical musicians, we are guardians of what gets played, and I think a lot of that comes from our own educations. It comes from what our teachers taught us, and I think as sort of the next generation, I think it's really important to just continue with exploring this. It's really a continuum of music. Music is continuing to be written, and we have to champion good music, and we should continue to be a part of that conversation of how we just bring a lot of these works that oftentimes are just neglected into the limelight. I really agree with your point about sort of how prolific Grażyna was, because I feel like that's something that we forget. She was kind of a superstar, and this is regardless of gender or any of those kinds of conversations. I mean, she was the concertmaster of the Polish Radio Orchestra. She won a number of composing competitions, and one of her I think her only piano concerto, I should say, was the winner of the Chopin composition competition, and the legendary Queen Elizabeth competition, which I participated years ago. She won the competition for that and wrote the set piece for the violin edition of that competition as well. And she served on almost every important violin competition jury in Europe at that time. So she was a real figure.
Yeah.
And sometimes it just takes time for she passed away prematurely, but it just takes time for the word to get around. Yeah.
I think the 1960s. So I mean, yeah, not that long ago, but yeah, interesting. I loved something that you said when you were at Caramoor, when we were talking after Deshawn Burton's recital, and you spoke about how some of the women composers that we do know today, that we remember, we kind of know because of their association with the men that they were married to, right? Clara Schumann, Fanny Mendelssohn, whatever. And I guess Bacewicz didn't have that asset.
Right. I think that's always, I feel like without sounding like I'm politicizing this too much, but as a musician, it's clear to me that a lot of the women composers that we've played, historically are always framed by the men around them. And it almost, well, it absolutely does take away the individual, the aspects of what that composer represents, by themselves. And one thing that I sort of going back to that earlier conversation of what I really loved about Bacevich's work is that it was so distinctive. It let me guessing like who is this composer and what makes this distinctly her. And as you delve into a lot of these works, I want to say this second period, which is where the first piano quintet comes from, just has these beautiful folk elements, and really sort of philosophical elements, which in some ways I sometimes associate with a lot of the Soviet composers in that era and maybe slightly before that. This sort of somber but kind of ethereal world, but she's able to sort of go back and forth with this really lively kind of fleet and scintillating kinds of textures as well. And it's really undeniably a part of her vernacular.
Yeah.
And then, of course, she's this master colorist. So if you listen to any of the sort of orchestral works, I'm thinking some of the late ones like Notturni Pensieri. I think this is like the Thoughtful Nocturne, which is this beautiful kind of tone painting. I mean, it's just these beautiful splashes of color and interesting use of instrumentation and orchestration. It's something that is so distinct and so evocative. I feel like it would just, I mean, you don't even have to know a story behind it. You really can put your own, you could really find yourself in this music. You can find elements of your own humanity in all of this music. And I think for me, that's the hallmark of a really expert composer. And, every piece you'll hear, by her will have this kind of element.
Do you have any other favorite of hers, a favorite piece that you like to play?
I think, as a pianist, the second sonata is wonderful. It has a connection with this quintet as well. I think that for me, the slow movements have this dirge-like quality, which are sort of very, I mean, truly heavy in the sense of the Italian word pesante. They hold you back, and in the midst of these chords emerges sort of other counterpoint, other happenings, and it's not easy music. There is definitely weight on the soul in this music, and I think this idea of kind of this mercurial and virtuosic nature comes through very well also in this second piano sonata. And that was the piece that really, I think, got me into Baciewicz's music in the first place. Um, so, I encourage all of you out there to listen to recordings of that work. I think Christian Zimmermann has a fantastic one on Deutsche Grammophon for this piece. Incredibly virtuosic music. It's like if you see the score, you're kind of thinking, how do I get around all of this? But she writes so pianistically as a pianist. This is something I think that's quite rare as well. That composers write really well for instruments, and she does this without question, just expertly. Other works, I think, the string quartets. It would be remiss of me not to mention sort of the other side of things. My counterparts in this venture for the piano quintet. There are actually many, many, many string quartets that really capture the skill and the innovations that Bacewicz was able to create in terms of color, sort of registrally, sort of bringing all four instruments really, really high in the sky, very softly, or having them very sparsely and sort of unison, but at the very high and the low end of the register moving, again, with very sparse motivic material, and able to find all the different ways that you're able to bring this kind of material to life.
Well, I feel like we hit the jackpot having you for this concert because you're such a champion of this composer. And I really hope that we see more and more of her works popping up on many, many programs.
Well, absolutely, Kathy. Yeah, thank you for bringing this to the foreground here. That's so
Musicians
wonderful.
and presenters as well should all be, looking out for this and helping to bring these pieces to audiences. So, thank you for sharing that. We look forward to seeing you back at Caramoor with the Verona Quartet, July 16th, and to hearing this wonderful piece. Thank you so much, David.
I can't wait to be back. Thanks so much, Kathy.